McCaslin. I'll be reading later this evening. I'm reading together with my touring buddy, Lee Johnson, who both of us are from British Columbia. And we've both been recently launched and published by the St. Thomas Poetry Series in Toronto. And our publisher, David Kent, is with us tonight to accompany us to this lovely gathering of this beautiful venue and lively crowd. And I'm a good friend of Pen Kemp, your local former writer, poet laureate, right? And so this is a very happy occasion for us, and we're meeting a lot of new people. And I just want to talk a little bit about Lee. Lee Johnson was my dissertation advisor at University of British Columbia when I was doing my PhD there from 80 to 84. And Lee guided me through my dissertation on Vernon Watkins, and then subsequently became a good friend of me and my husband over these many decades. And Lee is a Wordsworth and Milton scholar of considerable repute. He's done significant critical studies of the Romantic poets, and yet all his life he's been writing quietly on the side. And he's interested in the intricacies of form and meter, but he brings them forward into the 21st century. And he's been writing, every year he would send me a Christmas poem or little poems he'd written, and I kept saying to him, Lee, you really must publish this stuff, it's so good. And he was reluctant to do so. He said, I just do this for enjoyment and for the challenge and the pleasure of it. But finally, myself and a number of his friends persuaded him to publish his first volume. And happily, it worked out that this is his first volume of work, Poetria Nova, is that correct, Lee?
Yes.
Got it right. And he's very, he's very scholarly, and he knows his Latin and his Greek, and yet he makes his work accessible and brings the tradition, he innovates tradition and brings it forward into the now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and fellow poet, Lee Johnson.
I was going to observe that I enjoyed the guitar and song playing that we had, and I was going to observe, is it Mr. Dryburgh who was playing? My beard was once the color of your beard.
Mine was not as bushy as yours.
Well, anyway, the autumn leaves syndrome will catch up with you if you hang around long enough, and so on. Well, the little volume is called Poetria Nova. It's an arcane reference to a text published in 1210 AD by Geoffrey of Ansolf, a medieval treatise on how to write poetry. And the poems are organized into, again, a medieval theme, 3 groups. Poems called Poetry Mundana, which refer to the nature of the universe that we live in, Poetry Humana, our relationship to that universe, and Poetry Instrumentalis, which is the song of the earth, as it were. So there are these roughly 3 large thematic divisions for the kind of poem that one may be dealing with. So what I'm going to do is just read a few examples from these various categories, these medieval categories. Yes, I do. I'm interested in metrical verse, in symbolic forms in verse. I guess what I could just come clean and say that my poetry is a bit different from that of most poetry, and it's for those people who want something a little bit different. I believe poets are as different from one another as people in general are, that there are millions of poets on this planet, all of them unique, and I love poetry, and I love the variety of poetry. I think it would be dreadful if we all sounded alike, and there was only one kind of poetry. But my kind of poetry is not for everybody. You don't have to like these poems. And on the other hand, if you like them as something a little bit different from a lot of poetry out there, well, then that's fine too. So I thought what I would do is I would start with a couple of poems that deal with locations or places. This first one is from Poetria Instrumentalis, Poetry of the Earth, and it involves a national park in Northern California called Lawson Volcanic Park. And it's an incredible place because the word park is an old word, I think from Persian or something, that means a paradise or a garden, as in the Garden of Eden. But of course, volcanic has a very different suggestion about hellfire and brimstone and so on. And this park, Lawson Volcanic Park, has the bubbling Yellowstone-style pots of stinky stuff coming out of the earth, almost side by side with beautiful ponderosa forests and alpine flowers and so on and so forth. And when you camp there, you're camping inside the collapsed rim of an ancient volcano, which threw up 11,000 foot high Mount Lassen as a little sprout to the side. The original volcano was so huge it collapsed in on itself. And so I thought, well, this is a very self-contradictory landscape. And so I wrote a little poem which takes much less time to read than my explanation. And about this kind of interesting contrast between gardens and volcanism. And the poem is called Das kann sich sehen lassen, Lawson Volcanic Park. Now the German phrase is an idiomatic phrase which means, wow, that's impressive. So it's really and it enabled me to pun on the word Lawson in the German phrase of the Lawson Volcanic Park, so I just thought, well, that was very clever. So anyway, here is the poem. And for those of you who have embraced a ponderosa tree and known how wonderfully it smells and so on, you'll pardon people who are tree huggers if they can find ponderosas to do it with. The fragrance of this ponderosa forest, butterscotch, French vanilla, tang of clove, measures the quiet contentment of the trees as they in turn record the centuries in scented syllables, still rings of time. Nearby, sulphureous fumaroles of steam hiss threats from the caldera's hot abyss, contending with the incense of the forest. What deities are hereby glorified? What myth-making of heaven, of hell, is here? It is our earth, and we belong to it. Yeah. Okay, now, here's another poem involving a place. It's called trilocating, and that means if you have 3 points, you can locate where you are and maybe even who you are. So this poem comes out of a trip that I made to a timeshare the family had on the Costa del Sol in the northern Mediterranean, with Gibraltar in the background, and behind us the city of Ronda up in the mountains, where the oldest bullfight ring in Spain is. And there are pictures of Orson Welles, Ava Gardner, Ernest Hemingway still up on the, if you've been to Ronda, because they haunted this place back in the 20s and 30s. And I think Hemingway's Sun Also Rises probably has a lot to do with this site. My poem, Trilocating, does not. It has nothing to do with Hemingway. This poem tries to suggest that you have an object of perception, like Gibraltar. You have a perceiving subject, like a person or a poet. There's a statue of Rilke, by the way, up there in Ronda, facing over the chasm that is in the back side of Ronda. It goes down into a round valley, hence the name Ronda. And of course, the Romans were brilliant militarists, and they chose a perfect place to protect their troops, because you'd have to come up these mountains to get to Ronda, and then they had the the valley for their food so that they could supply themselves and stave off any kind of siege. Okay, so we've got objects of perception, perceiving subjects like Rilke. By the way, the bronze statue of Rilke in Ronda is right next to Rilke Realty. They now use the poet's name to help flog houses and business firms. The money changers are one. And then, of course, there's a third, more metaphysical presence that unites the perceiving subject and the object perceived. It seems an island floating on the sea, backlit by sunlight, on a glittering wedge of light, a slowly moving slice of time, coming to focus on our field of view, that now meets mountains rising at our back, that sees a city where high ridges meet above a gorge to form a bridge of land, where the bronze statue of a poet stands, the sightless eyes belying all they knew, gazing across the chasm next to the city. Not a dream city, but an ancient fortress above the circle of a fruitful valley. The rock, the statue, and time telescoped in a mere thing of nature and of mind in a life's form. We seek the form of light, the harmony within the presences of things and thought, that gives a breath to love, to motion, to life's rhythm's resonance. It is in you, light's sound, is in you now. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give a fairly tough poem, and then we'll go to some that give you some relief from straining the ear and the brain. This poem is called Cratylus, which is the title of a dialogue by Plato. And in that dialogue, Socrates and his friends Cratylus and a few others are trying to talk about the nature of language. What's the nature of language? What about words? Do they actually name the things that they describe, capture the essential quality of them? As in onomatopoeia, we sometimes have words like bang and zap and so on that kind of sound like the things they describe. Or are they just arbitrary sounds attached to the things that we live in as images and so on? And they go back and forth about this problem, and it's a real problem because in Plato's time, the deconstructionists and the Derrideans were called sophists, and they claimed that you could make words mean anything you wanted to, and so on. And Cratylus himself, according to one legend, became so disillusioned about language that he refused to speak the rest of his life and just gave hand signals when he needed something. But words betray. At the end of the dialogue, Socrates comes up with the early version of the theory of forms, and that there is a place where the buck stops, that there is some kind of conceptual reality that helps to regulate the physical reality of time and space, including our words. And so this poem, which is geometrically designed to capture that sense of, and you will know that if you purchase the book for $15, about the price of a burger and brew, but not all that bad, you can kind of follow the form of the poem on the page better than you can hearing it. In time, images fade. The senses turn inward. As twilight and its silhouettes darken the garish energy of day to ancient eyes with so much sun in them that they declare a language of their own. Nature knows why we couple and beget, but we know why we love beyond old stones. Distracted by minute realities, were we aware of what was always there? Or was it only in the words we used? A seashell and a spiral galaxy move in the same abstraction, disappearing as images, as facts, even as words, attaining eloquence as thought itself flows from the form of thought, a world of being where the thought of time foretells space-time, a world where words will come to be as language flows from its ideal form. Now, a few years back, there's something, a tradition in our continent here of high school reunions. I have a couple of love poems for you now. And a girl that I was very keen on in high school, we went our separate ways when I went off to university. She had gone through something like 3 marriages, 3 divorces, a number of other broken relationships, and finally she contacted me a few years ago, wanting to know how things were in my life. And I thought, you know, she makes me feel like the last name in her book. So how do I deal with this? She's a nice person, but her track record would suggest sustainability is not her thing. So I wrote this little poem called High School Reunion, and we'll have to see whether you think it's a polite brush off or if I'm being mean. Your dark hair and dark almond eyes, their light did take me by surprise. Old friend, an old man's prurient smile would, were you young, perhaps beguile. Beneath your wrinkles and white hair, I sense the girl I loved is there. Where is the boy you thought you knew? Or may false dreams at last seem true? Well, I now live and sleep and watch the past, the present keep. So, another little poem. This is meant in love to, well, actually my old wife, I wrote this with her in mind last summer. One of my brothers passed away not quite a year ago, and I found that she was very, very helpful in consoling me. So I wrote this as a thank you to her, and I hope she felt this to be an elegant, playful comment on what she had done. The poem is called Whose Center is Everywhere. That title used to be used to describe God, who, circumference nowhere, centers everywhere. But it also applies to the modern universe we live in, because an astrophysicist or an astronomer could be asked, what is the center of our universe? And it happens to be wherever you are. And it's kind of like a rainbow. Your rainbow is peculiar to you, and somebody else's rainbow is peculiar to that person. But everywhere in the universe can be a center. So I thought about this, and I put together the following poem, which is really an unrhymed sonnet with an octave and sestet. You tell me there is something in your eye, and I behold it. Yes, a grain of sand, transported by some molecules of air, revealed by particles and waves of light, reflected in thin water drops of tears. Earth, air, fire, water. Ancient elements enclosed within the circle of your eye, bringing a message from the universe that you are one with distant galaxies, sharing their composition, energy, and matter, all within your eye. Yes, I see something in your eye, and I, being made of all these very elements, am drawn to you, my universe of love. She's calling me. She liked the poem. I can hear her. So there we are. I'll kind of conclude here with 3 poems about birds. These are from the first section of the collection, and the idea here is that birds are natural singers who sing out of biological necessity and also because they simply enjoy doing so. And birds have taught us a great deal about music and harmony. They're associated with stories of the Garden of Eden. Presumably bird song isn't any different today from the bird song that the mythical Adam and Eve listened to. And so the idea here is that if you could listen in a moment of great quietness and peace of soul to a bird song sufficiently enough, you might just flash back to that time of primal perfection or something like that, you see. So, and there have been people like the composer Olivier Messiaen who felt a mystical sense about birdsong. There's a phrase called the language of the birds, which is about the mysticism of birdsong and what it represents as a kind of gift of the creation to us to help us with our music and with our sense of harmony as we go through life. So this poem, which deals with that, the first of 3 bird poems I'll read you, is called White Birds. When a whole mess of white pelicans took off next to on a lake next to a campsite where I was, it just startled me. I wasn't expecting this. My silent watercraft glides on the lake, and so I move through time. White water birds, like undulating triangles of light, spiral above the water, answering slowly the glittering sunlight on the waves, that to the sunward eye become a line of dancing light, measuring out the day, and all days here as a remembered line, moving across the circle of the lake, where I still move through time to move through light. Time dwells in darkness and depends on light to take its measure. Thus, I seek you here where white wings multiply into a sea of radiance, all surrounding, ever still. Instruct me in the language of the birds. Make my dark words transparent to your light. The next bird poem, called The Lure, celebrates the green heron. Now, most of us have seen a lot of great blue herons, but green herons are only about 1.5 feet high, and they have yellow legs and iridescent blackish-greenish feathers. How many of you have seen green herons? They're quite elusive, hard to find.
Where do you see them? Where are they?
Marshes, lakes, so on, and they're very shy. Pardon?
In this part of the country?
Yeah, they're here too. They're here around London, Ontario. You've got some bodies of water. You might find, if you're patient, a green heron. They were my mother's favorite bird, and in the lake area where I grew up. And anyway, green herons are a tool-using bird, which is very clever of them. They'll take a little leaf or a feather and put it on a pool as a lure to attract fish to it, which is pretty bright for a bird brain, but they do this. And so here's a little poem called The Lure. I saw a sly green heron take a feather from its breast and make a lure to float, whirl and enhance the wind and water with its dance. I move in rhythms of surprise to light from your inquiring eyes. And when I close my eyes, it seems we counter-dream each other's dreams. You move so gently through the air and on the surface of the sea. Distracted, I become aware that you are dancing with me where I once was and again will be. One more bird poem, and then a Christmas poem, an explicitly Christmas poem, and then I think that it means it's time for the musicians to get back on stage and regale us with their inheritance of what birds have given us. This poem is called Ricercare. Now, it's a fancy word which was used by musical composers in the 16 and 1700s when they were writing fugues and contrapuntal pieces trying to work out a solution to some musical problem. And so a ricercare is a fugue which is exploring some kind of problem it's trying to solve. In this poem, I start with a vague sense of a bird, and I try to identify what kind of a bird it is. And I think about the bird and how it differs from our world. And then I think about the bird increasingly and how we are like the bird. And finally, I kind of become the bird as we go through the poem. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but this is what at least I had in mind. Oh, silhouetted bird, a water bird, heron perhaps, or egret. Be my guide and symbol of old time's divinities. Searching the future in this rarest place, a mountain lake joined to a shortened river, fresh water, tidal, ebbing to the sea, sensing the pressure of the moon and sea. And you, positioned in a counterflow, your dark reflection on the water surface, you focus twilight, mirrored counterworld, whose images do not distract, for you attend to shadows shimmering below, and know no tears of elegiac time. Betrayal is in our control, not much else is. Its opposite, eyes meeting eyes, freshens, surprises, jolts us from our sleep. As when the circle of a quiet pool directs the mind to vibrancies of air and light, dancing on fields of mountain snow, cosmic and quantum worlds of energy on matter. This is time out of time. Mirror my soul, still sunlight on still water, and move from light to light invisible. And body as your atoms break asunder, may they recall, in servitude to time, traces of service to eternity. I think I'll conclude my samples of poems here for you tonight with a Christmas poem called Recessional. It's one of these two voices kind of poems. The first voice, you might say, is the body. The second voice is the soul having a little dispute with each other as we imagine the Christmas season disappearing into the background. So first of all, the first voice. My lust for happiness wants all, will not take less. My wealth of self-regard increases and grows hard. Why do you ask of me nothing but poverty? My mastery of the night does not require your light. I ask because my light cannot but love the night, in acts of poverty to set the spirit free from all that self-regard makes vanishingly hard, for I will have no less than all your happiness. Thank you.
The wild musk rose, aromatic hush, stirs a geometry of hearts. This earthly paradise, inverting cone, mountain, hut or vortex overturned,